Welcome, everyone, to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me, as always. We are diving in today to having a conversation about spiritual practice and what that is, what that looks like, and the idealized version of what that looks like, and the realistic version of what that can look like. Because I think there are a lot of preconceived ideas of what spirituality should look like. And people can get pretty fired up behind what they perceive it to look like. And we see that already. Just look at religious division, right? One religion says one thing, another one says another. And in extreme cases, people will fight to the death to defend their truth. Yet, whenever I've talked to spirit, different ascended masters, asking them about religions and is there one right religion? Is there one right way to be? The most beautiful image that I was shown, and this was actually one time where I was able to have a connection with Jesus, and he showed me all of these slides, these kind of water slides of every different religion, and that they all lead back to the same pool. And that pool, that beautiful water energy in that pool is love. And so he said everyone's journey takes them on a journey based on their soul lesson, whether that's a religion or a practice or a non-practice. But at the end, it leads them into love, each one giving experience. So if we take that same idea with, embracing, holding compassion for all religions, and we bring that into spiritual practice, this is where you really have the opportunity to embrace your spiritual practice, your spiritual needs for what they are for you and how that looks for you, so that you can really feel the divinity in your everyday. You can feel the sacredness in your everyday. It doesn't have to be in every moment, but these little pieces in every day can help you dive into that ownership and that worthiness of being on your spiritual journey, not waiting for someone to tell you, yes, you are in it, or yes, you've arrived. Rather, it's you feeling your way into what feels into alignment for you in your connection to something more. And so really, I truly think that spiritual practice is not just limited to what happens when you're meditating, right? What happens on the mat, on the cushion, wherever it is. It's really anything that brings you back into alignment with your soul, your truth, or your inner peace. And really, anything that brings you back into that alignment. And so for some people, their spiritual practice really happens when they're running. Others, it's when they are doing their art. For some, it's when they are meditating, right? And it's a deeply spiritual practice. For me, I get a lot of my spiritual connection when I'm dancing, as well as when I'm out in nature, specifically in water. Huge spiritual practice for me. Deep connection happens in water. But truly, it's how you integrate your spirit into your daily life. It's not just about transcending life, but being really fully present in it. And so that's that point that I wanted to bring up, that we can make our lives sacred. We can have sacred mornings. We can have a sacred cup of coffee or a sacred cup of tea. And even just, the moment you're pouring, say, your coffee into your mug in the morning, you pour it into that mug, knowing it's going to come into your body, and you add your intention into that. As I pour this wonderful coffee into this mug, I'm so excited for the flavor. And as I drink it, may I know that I matter, that I am worthy, that the warmth that enters into my body reminds me of the eternal source love available to me. I mean, it could be anything, but we can make these moments sacred, and we can make moments sacred with our family as well, placing intentions. My kids and I, we made moon water the other day on the full moon. And then we all had sips of the moon water the next day. And it wasn't a long, drawn out process, but we kept it simple but purposeful. And it was fun. And it was a thing. We had moon water, right? Like, it's these little things that can make a really big difference. And so one of the things is spiritual practice really is a returning to self. And I say returning very specifically because so many of us have been lost or felt forgotten in fear, judgment, or ego. And I think for most of you listening, if you look back on your life, you can see where you have floundered in moments, months, years, decades even, in fear, judgment, or ego. And part of the remembering about this alignment, discovering these spiritual practices, is looking face to face into those aspects of fear, judgment, and ego. Because really, when we judge something, we're judging something because it usually gives us a trigger. And it's a trigger of something that makes us feel uncomfortable within. And why are we feeling uncomfortable within? Well, because the ego is desiring to keep us safe. But the ego sometimes will warp what that actually looks like. And we would rather often be in the ego or in judgment rather than be in fear. This is also where some people really stay in anger instead of being in fear, because to feel the depths of fear is so incredibly uncomfortable for our human vessel that we will do anything to avoid it. And oftentimes we fear that connection of meeting self in the mirror so much that we will do everything to avoid it. And so for some people, when they think of a spiritual practice, they think they need to like blast it open. And for some people, it does happen. They'll have this spontaneous Kundalini awakening, or, maybe they use a plant medicine that just like blasts them into an experience. But for others, it's this gentle returning to through making these sacred moments every day to connect into yourself, to connect into your body. And it's kind of like, even in those moments where you take a breath before reacting, that breath you take before you react the way you really want to react, but you take that moment, that is a sacred spiritual practice right there. Because what you're doing is you're pausing the energy for a moment to take stock of, does this feel aligned for me? How do I actually want to react as my whole self? And this pause before you speak harshly actually helps you to start to return to yourself. You're pausing, you're asking yourself, is this response based on my conditioning? Or is this a response that I'm choosing? And I did a video a bit about this a little while back when I was in Mount Shasta. And this idea just really sits with me a lot, is like, we have these programmed responses that sometimes we think are the way we should be. But when you're returning to yourself in an authentic way, you're going to start asking yourself those questions. Does that actually reflect who I am today? And so it's not about judging the first response that comes to mind. Oftentimes that is conditioning, but the second response you get to choose. And again, that's when you get to choose in any point of your day to make it sacred, to make it a step towards returning to self. The moment that you choose love of self, love energy in whichever way over proving a point, can bring you back into your spiritual practice. Now, that being said, though, what I'm trying to express is not about, all we need is love and that's it, airy fairy, and it's light and beautiful. There are times we do need to prove a point, because there are times maybe we do need to stand up for ourselves, set a boundary. And when you're doing that in an authentic way, you are being in your moment of spiritual practice, recognizing that your energy matters and putting up whatever boundary for you does matter. You're doing that out of love for self. So again, spiritual practice is not just light and love and positivity. There is the shadow side of spiritual practice, that shadow side of meeting ourselves where we are at and being willing to look at what that is. And the same can be applied to others, meeting others where they're at, trying to release our own judgment and ego aspects pertaining to somebody else, knowing that they're moving through it as well. And when we can do that, we can make that moment a part of our spiritual practice. We can still set a boundary with the person, but we can do it out of love for self, compassion for meeting that person where they're at. And another thing with spiritual practices is it's not just the quiet things, right? Like, yes, spiritual practice is journaling. Yes, it is meditation. Yes, it is prayer or mantras or qigong or yoga. Yes, it is that, but it is also speaking your truth. it is also saying yes or saying no with grace. It is also the actions you take, like I said, creating art, dancing, moving your body, walking barefoot and feeling the earth. This one I can't express enough. When I'm feeling so just in my head, in my upper chakras, or really busy with mom life, and I'm like, whoa, I'm getting wired up. I will go outside and put my feet on the grass and just stand there and let all of my energy sink down into the earth. The earth has a capacity to reground us so quickly. And I can even do that while I'm having a conversation with my kids. Say they're playing volleyball in the backyard and I've got my feet on the grass. And I'm making that intentional step onto the grass with my bare feet to recalibrate my energies while I'm talking to my kids. Again, taking those little moments to coming back to yourself. The same as crying and letting it be a release rather than a breakdown that you feel shame or judgment for. I know this is one for me. I used to think, growing up that I was strong if I didn't cry. I was super strong and I can hold back my tears and all of this. And I had to learn really through becoming a mom that the tears are actually a good thing and they're a beautiful thing. And there can be such an energetic release from the tears. It doesn't have to be seen as a breakdown. I had a breakdown. I lost myself. It's not that. I got to a point where I needed to physically release, and I did so through tears. There's power in that. The other thing with the spiritual practice too is that it's not about being good. A spiritual practice is about being real. And real spiritual practice follows experiences of anger, sadness, resistance, as well as joy, triumph, and acceptance. Right? Spiritual practice is woven within all of that, holding space for all of that to happen. So you could have a deeply spiritual expression one day of screaming and yelling into your pillow, or you could go to one of those break rooms. Those rooms they set up with all kinds of stuffed plates and things, and you pay money and you go there to smash it. I can't remember what the rooms are called, but that can be spiritual for you. It can be so many different things, but spiritual practice allows space for you, the human, to express not only your human emotions, but also your expressive, spiritual, and expansive emotions. And sometimes we need to access those through anger, through sadness, as much as we do through laughter and through joy. It's that idea of, there's a song, I think the Bare Naked Ladies sing it, where they're like, I'm the kind of guy that laughs at a funeral. And I think that's such a valid thing, is sometimes we can be surprised the ways in which our emotions need to come out. Sometimes it can feel inappropriate, but truly the body is trying to give its expression space to be seen and heard and witnessed, because sometimes we don't even know what it is we're feeling until the body can shake it out and shake it free. So really, with this idea of it not being good, but being real, your spiritual practice is inviting you to witness your humanity without shame and still choose to move forward with presence. That is so incredibly important. There's a huge, huge cloud energy of shame over people these days. And, really, I think it's been there for a long time. Judgment, shame. And that is one of the greatest thieves of peace and harmony within us is shame. And we have been kind of conditioned through society to feel shame for so many things. And even let's just go right into sacred sexuality, because I am going to do a podcast on it. I have the notes on my desk here. Sacred sexuality is a beautiful sacred practice. And it is something that is so empowering for people that connect into that energy in a sacred way, regardless of if it's individual, if it's with a partner, regardless of gender and gender identity. The shared experience or the experience in self is huge when we allow it to be more than just a physical connection. When we allow ourselves to embrace the energetics and the monumental access to consciousness in those moments, we are stepping into something way bigger, but we have been taught to feel shameful for it. I know a lot of this is starting to change, but even in society of like repressing the feminine, repressing the feminine's expression of her sexuality and deeming it negative and shameful is ridiculous when it is one of the most natural energies and forms of expressing it is through the body, through sensuality, through sacred dance, through sacred union. Like, if we start to look at all the ways in which we've sort of been ingrained and indoctrined to feel shame, we can see why we have so many blocks to really embodying what a spiritual practice actually is. Because it can happen in anything from sacred sexuality to meditation to spiritual practices, but as well to washing your dishes, to when you have a shower, to when you're walking in nature, to when you're creating art, even to when you're daydreaming. It is woven and waiting for us to access within our lives in every moment. We don't have to take it in every moment. There's moments where we need to be very human, totally present here, and that's important. But there's equal moments where we need to embrace the bounty that is around us. And so with this, I really hope to leave you all with an open invitation from the universe to explore what is it to be spiritual to you? What does that look like? What does the sacred practice look like to you? How do you define what it is to be spiritual? How does it differ from how you do it to how somebody else does it? How can you have compassion for how somebody else does it, but also still honor the way you do it? Maybe one person wants to dress a certain way. Maybe they want to wear all white and feel connected into this purity and essence, whereas you want to be in color and you want to express, whichever gender fluidity aspect you're feeling in that day. Both can be extremely spiritual in their intention. We're not limited to how we need to be. So the message from Spirit today is really, it's not about being perfect. It's not about always being peaceful, but it's about being present. It's the practice of remembering who you are in the middle of real life. And it's the practice of allowing yourself the space and authenticity to be that. So that if you are drawn to a moment of intense mantra and meditation, you do it and you receive what messages are there. If you're drawn to be silly and do cartwheels on the grass with your kids, you do it and be present in that. Being spiritual is embracing the mind, body, spirit aspect of what it means to be human as well as a spiritual being. And this is what the world of spirit wishes for you to remember, is you get to embrace this at any point, at any time, in the way in which it aligns for you. Because I will leave you with this. Spirit has always, always said repeatedly, the most important person on your spiritual journey is you. We do not need to feel shameful for thinking that. We need to feel authentic and worthy to be able to embrace that as our truth, because you matter. And when you give yourself the validation that you matter, your capacity to embrace so many more outside of you, meet them where they're at, is expanded tenfold. So I wish that for you, that you have the willingness to embrace exactly who you are at this time and embrace what spirituality can look like for you, how it'll evolve for you, and be open to the journey of it throughout your life. So I will leave that with all of you for now. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me, and I wish you a beautiful rest of your week, and I will see you all next week.